Once again, thanks to Jeremiah for leading us through these 3 days. It's great to be back here with you all. Good morning. We have a wonderful day planned for you. I can't wait to get to it, but first I have a few things I want to share. With everything that everyone's been going through over the last 6 months, the pandemic of racism and social injustice that we've all been facing, the wildfires that are happening here in California that many of us are displaced or have family members who have been displaced. There's a lot going on. And I want to acknowledge that, I want to put it in the room and hold a safe space so that this entire conference is a place where you can come, hopefully get away for just a little bit of time, spend some time with those who think like you do, who serve students and families throughout the state, and who can support you in your mission and what you've chosen to do with your life. So thanks again for being here. A lot of us have been grieving over the last 6 months, grieving time with people we love, grieving, in some cases, the people we love themselves. And there's also a lot of things that we used to do that we're no longer doing. And sometimes, we're missing some of those distractions that came with life before COVID and really kept us going to the point where we didn't stop and take a chance to reflect. And so if there's one thing I want to do this morning with you all is take a second to walk through a bit of a reflection of where we're at and hopefully leave you with some encouraging message that can bring you through into the next few months as we continue to do this very difficult job under very uncertain circumstances. I was just thinking about how when I was 12 years old, I was driving with my mom, and I was a pretty good kid overall. I didn't really talk back too much, but I remember this one time where I felt pretty empowered to talk back because she was distracted. We were driving, and I remember I said something especially rude, and my mom, she's a strong lady. She didn't get mad. She didn't yell, but she did kind of, while she was driving, reach over and flip down the sun visor of that 1989 silver Honda Accord hatchback, flip open the mirror, face it right on me, and said, "Look at yourself." That's what a person looks like who talks back to their mom. There wasn't much I could do, and actually it was a good time to look at myself and to consider, there was no comeback. It was just the first time I remember just absolutely being stopped in my tracks. It wasn't rude, but it was a chance for me just to sit back, and I had to deal with it. And that's kind of a funny story. I think it's hilarious now. And in trying to find some humor in all of this, in our house, we've been referring to the last 6 months as one big look at yourself moment for our family, for our country and our society at large. And this morning I want to take a look at ourselves as human beings. What can we find out from the study of psychology and sort of the history of the study of our humanity? I'm going to bring up a few familiar characters and some people who really helped shape the field of psychology. I apologize for the lack of diversity on this slide. The good news is that they do seem to get happier over time. And so what Freud said about us as human beings is that one of our main driving instincts in life was to be together, to affiliate. And then Alfred Adler came along and he said, actually, Freud, that's not just one of the things that we want to do in life as human beings, but it's actually our main goal in life is to belong. And building on Alfred Adler, Abraham Maslow came along a little bit later and said, if human beings don't feel like they belong, then they cannot fully become who they're meant to be. They can't reach their potential without the feeling of belonging. And finally, it was Carl Rogers who said, if humans are heard and feel understood, they belong. It makes sense that it would be important to us as human beings to belong. A long time ago, if you didn't belong to a group, you might not have shelter, food, or protection. And belonging felt like a matter of life or death. And for a lot of us, it still feels like that today. I grew up learning from the adults in my life, many of which were in situations where they felt like they didn't belong. My grandfather, William Morgan, was the first African American to graduate from McGeorge Law School here in Northern California. And he went on to become the first black judge on the Superior Court here in Sacramento. And he would tell me inspiring stories about the people along the way who embraced him in spite of, because of his differences, and that supported him. But he also had other stories that were sad, stories that were discouraging and even scary, especially for a kid. Those stories had more to do with being excluded because he was different. There's really two things we do when we want to belong. We all have that deep need for belonging, but we can get there a couple different ways. We can exclude other people. Excluding other people to belong is something we all do, but we don't always realize it. Think about maybe middle school, or for that matter, high school, or even your job, or your family. We do it a lot. But it's incredibly important, especially now, to be aware of when it's happening. It's easy to do. If I don't feel like I belong, it doesn't take much effort to feel prideful, to say that what I think is right, what you think is not right, therefore I belong to this group. But there is another way, a way that's not motivated by pride or the attempt to take control or power away from another group. We can also belong by being the ones to embrace others because they're different. This is more challenging, and it takes a lot of effort. It means you have to be vulnerable, in often cases humble, not prideful. But in the end, it supports others, and it really, instead of taking away power, it empowers. I got a chance to see how people use exclusion and how people embrace others early on in life. This is Robin and Reggie. They're my parents. When we moved in the early 1980s from the city to a suburb in Northern California, we had all kinds of different reactions to our presence in the neighborhood. Some folks were curious and embraced our differences. They wanted to know what it was like in the city where we had moved from. They wanted to have us over for dinner, and they wanted to connect. And on the other hand, there were others that really felt that their sense of belonging was threatened by my dad, a black man, living in their neighborhood. And because of that, some of the reactions that I was witness to, including anger, and some were even very scary, to try to get us to leave the neighborhood because they didn't feel like we belonged. And I know many of you watching today have felt like that in one situation or another, and I'm sure to a much greater extent than what I'm describing. But I use this story to illustrate that there are different ways we meet our deep need for belonging. I was just driving a couple of weeks ago, and a car passed me on my left. And when I saw the vehicle pass, there were a number of messages on it in the form of bumper stickers and some other things. And some of those same feelings came up for me back to when we were in a neighborhood and felt like maybe we didn't belong, because some of the things written on the car that passed me were messages of exclusion. In one way or another, they were simply saying, a person like me doesn't belong. A person with my beliefs, there's no place for that person. And so I started to feel like maybe that was true. And if it was true that I didn't belong here, that was scary to me. But my fear very quickly, really even before I noticed it, turned to anger. And then my anger turned to judgment. I had the thought, and I don't know if you've ever done this before, to speed up and actually see what this person looked like, because what was written on their vehicle made me so angry, first fearful, then angry, that I wanted to see what a person who believed these things looked like. I guess so that I could try to maybe avoid them in the future. And it was right then when it hit me, and I remembered my mom flipping down that mirror on the passenger side right in front of me, and her saying, "Look at yourself." And I just imagine her saying in that situation, that's what a person looks like who excludes others because they're different. And it was a tough moment. And what I would say to encourage you here today, if you've ever found yourself in that situation, us as educators, as mental health professionals, as the people who are guiding and shaping our next generation during a time that's really simply unprecedented and uncertain, I would encourage you, do not let your fear turn you in to what you're scared of. Continue embracing our students and our families and giving them a place to belong. Thank you for being here today. We're so excited to host you. We're so excited to have Surgeon General Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris here again with us today to share with you all of her work on ACEs and how trauma affects us all as we move through life. It's going to be a wonderful time, and we can't wait. So I'm passing it back to Jeremiah. Thank you so much for being here, and can't wait to see you later today.